Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is splint. Let's take a look at some of the definitions or ways that we use this verb. The first way you're likely to hear splint used is to mean to secure a broken limb with a splint. Now, as you look at that definition, you can see the same word, but this is the noun form of the word being used to help us understand the meaning. And that always makes things a little difficult, right? If you didn't know what this verb is, are you certain you know what the noun is? So to help us out here, I've got a picture I would love for you to look at. It's on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And if you look at this item, you can see someone's arm, and then this lower portion here is being secured by something. Another word you might hear like a brace, right? So that object here on the screen, that's what we're talking about. So after someone has been injured, this might be a way to treat or prevent further injury by securing this broken limb. So when we use limb, we're talking about arms, legs, fingers, toes, etc. A second way you might hear splint used is to mean to brace something. So this second definition is going to apply to all things that are not parts of our body. But the same idea holds, right? We're trying to secure or brace something so that maybe it doesn't separate or fall apart. You should know that splint is a regular verb. To make the progressive form, you're going to add an ing to form splinting. The past tense and participle forms of this verb are made by adding ed. Our base verb, splint, ends with a T sound, so our past tense and participle ending is going to make an id sound. We're going to add an extra syllable as we say this word. So it should sound like this: splinted, splinted. Okay. Now, there aren't any additional phrasal verbs that use this particular verb, so that's going to allow us to focus on practicing a couple different verb tenses with our verb of the day. Today, we're going to practice the simple past tense and the imperative. We're going to start with the simple past tense. We use this verb tense to talk about actions that were completed at some known time in the past. You might see time signals like yesterday, last week, last year, or even a specific date in the past to let you know that this is a completed action. But sometimes those time signals aren't in every single sentence that is written in the past tense. It might be implied as part of a conversation or a longer passage or story. So the nice thing about making sentences in the affirmative or positive in the simple past tense is that our verb is going to look the same no matter what our subject is. So we don't have to remember different forms. We're just going to use that ed ending with our verb. So an example of this might be: firefighters splinted his ankle and then put him in a rescue basket. Okay, so here there's probably some concern that this man's ankle might have been broken, and they're describing they braced it, right? They used something that looked like the picture we saw earlier to help secure that potentially broken ankle, and then they took him away. Now, if you want to make a negative sentence in the simple past tense, our structure is going to be did not and then the base verb. So notice we're not using that ed form in the negative. Here's another example sentence: the trainer didn't splint the athlete's finger before the second half. Okay, so here there wasn't some type of contraption put on the person's finger. If you want to ask a yes or no question in the simple past tense, our structure is going to be did, then our subject, then the base verb. So again, notice our ed is not in this yes or no question. It's only in the affirmative. Here's another example. Did the nurses splint her leg? Okay, so again, we're asking whether somebody has had their broken limb secured. Next, let's take a look at the imperative. You might have learned this as commands, and it's rather unique in English because we don't have a stated subject, right? The subject is always implied, and it's either you singular, so you meaning one person, or you plural, so two or more people. And it's common to hear imperatives or commands being given in a healthcare setting. So that's how I tried to think about this, how doctors, nurses, other healthcare professionals might communicate with one another. So they're just going to tell someone else to do something. Anytime we're making an imperative, we're telling someone to do something, we can start our sentence with the base verb. Okay, so our example here, splint her wrist while we wait for the x-ray to be read. Okay, so again, this might be a command coming from one healthcare professional to another. We can always sort of soften these statements, make them a little bit nicer, more polite by adding the word please. We can do that at the beginning of the sentence or the end, but the meaning stays the same. If you want to make a negative imperative, though, our structure is going to be do not and then the base verb. You might hear some people use the contraction don't, and that's visible here in my example. Don't splint the limb too tightly, right? So don't secure it too tightly. That could cause other issues or problems for the injured person. You're going to notice from my screen here that there are no yes or no questions when it comes to commands. So that's why you're only seeing an affirmative and negative example. Now let's take a moment to look at some words that are related to our verb of the day, splint. And as no surprise, since we already talked about this, you might hear splint used to describe that rigid material. So maybe it's plastic that is used to support and prevent movement of a broken bone. So an example of this, maybe you've had a broken bone and you want to ask the doctor, how long do I have to wear this splint? So this and splint, we can see there that's being used as a noun. A second way you might hear a noun used, this noun, splint, used, is to refer to a thin strip of wood that's suitable for interweaving. And again, I'm going to include a picture here. So when it comes to baskets, maybe you're interested or skilled in this art, the individual pieces of wood might be referred to as splints. An example here, how many splints were woven to make that basket? Right? A third way you might hear splint used is really specific to horses. And so they can have this sort of enlargement on the inside of their legs. And if you're working with animals, then you might hear this noun form used often. An example of this, veterinarians use many different methods to treat splint bone conditions. Our last word we're going to look at today is the noun splint armor. Okay? If you're studying history, you might encounter this description or as you kind of study battles and fighting. But this is a type of armor that's generally overlapping and that allows one to move their limbs a bit more freely, right? So it might look something a bit like that. An example sentence here, the museum has several pieces of splint armor from the 16th century. So I'm far from an expert in this area, but I have seen it used or mentioned as I have read about history. So I always learn so much from studying words. When I thought of the word splint, I only thought of broken bones, to be honest. But as you can see, there are many other ways this word gets used. And I want you to know I'm so grateful. This was a suggested verb from one of the channel's subscribers, and I'm so grateful for that. So please feel free to make comments. If you've got certain verbs you want to see covered, great. I'd love to know that. I want these to be useful to you and interesting. So thanks so much for watching. I appreciate everyone who's subscribed. Please continue to share with your friends if you think that will help them build their English skills as well. Have a great day.